Is going?
Yes, you're on.
Okay. Thank you, Michelle, for that great speech, and thank you for.
It's my honor.
Thank you for the opportunity to be here, Tony. Thank you very much, and thank you for videoing, and to the Honorable Commander of Post 7470, Barry Jones. Thank you for being here, and Landon Beckett, trustee from that post, and good member all around. We have such a world before us now where communications are sent and received in reality in the blink of an eye. Vast amounts of information are at our fingers' touch. Reservoirs of data ready to fill our minds with the purpose of reasoning, purpose of business, and purpose of living. To that enlightenment, Black history, almost everyone knows, is American history, pure and simple. In 19 days, I am encircled by my 68th tree ring. What I find fascinating on getting this information is the flow along our networks about African Americans who really had a hand in building this country. They tilled, sowed, and reaped the land. It was to me a sorrowful existence. It was slavery. For those slaves and their descendants, for about 246 years, a little longer in Texas, it was life. Some knew slavery had to end for them. They knew it would end in time. Others escaped to start anew in areas of the country that would accept their presence to a limiting degree. But it wasn't slavery. Some, as with today's military services, took the initiative, once allowed, and joined the U.S. military service to fight in the Civil War. Besides the Civil War, in the Continental Navy, they were African Americans that were both free and enslaved Black, and they composed 10%. In 1798, the Secretary of the Navy, Benjamin Stoddard, banned Negroes and mulattoes from the war, from the Navy. But if you were in, you could stay, but you couldn't come in. For once, the Navy didn't hold the initiative there. It just followed what the Army and the Marine Corps were doing. 4 years later, in the War of 1812, they said, come on back, we need you. And at that point, the Navy had 16.5% of Black folk in it to handle affairs. In 1919, the Navy suspended the first enlistments of African Americans because officers believed that Filipinos made better messmen than Blacks. We look and we see things that are black and white. In some areas, it's seething and simmering to points of violence on racial terms. Nothing new here. Tulsa, Oklahoma, Rosewood, Florida, Houston, Texas. And Navy also had its episodes. Port Chicago, 1944. Explosion while handing munitions. Over 320 people killed. 220 of them were Black sailors. So you had 258 that decided, oh, we're not going to do this work anymore. So they were court-martialed. 208 of them would receive bad conduct discharges. 50 of them, the Chicago 50 as they were known, Port Chicago 50, were convicted and sentenced to 15 years. But so much pressure from the Black community, from civil rights leaders especially, they only did 2 years and were released. You're talking about the most dangerous work in the Navy at the time, the unrated, low menial task people that were presented to them. In Guam in 1944 also, there were riots there because of oppressive conditions and violent racism on that important base in the Pacific. There, the sailors were arrested and imprisoned. But probably the best way to handle things was as it was done in Port Hueneme, California, with the 34th Construction Battalion. 1,000 Blacks decided to go on a hunger strike. And after two days, they came off their strike. The reason was that the post commander was not promoting any Blacks to the rank of Chief Petty Officer. That anchor right there proves a Chief Petty Officer. He wouldn't do it, so they hunger striked, and what happened was the commanding officer and the executive officer were relieved of their duties. Today, we stand here on this hallowed ground, marked by the remembrance of those who existed before us. We have family members, neighbors, and veterans who surround us in the steel of their voices and in the loudness of their deeds. In particular, we honor those who served our country during the war for the most hated of reasons, under the pretense of economic instability. Man wanted to continue slavery to maintain a high lifestyle, to keep their income rolling in at the cost of men, women, and children of a darker complexion, performing labor under the coverage of personal property. When given the opportunity, descendants of those drawn in chains from Africa served to quell the beast of servitude for over 200 years of breaking families apart, selling souls from state to state, performing sexual iniquities on women and men alike, killing at will, etc., etc., etc. They joined with the rest of Mr. Lincoln's troops in fighting and ultimately defeating the usurpers and rebels. They became, and they were, the U.S. colored troops. Without their participation, the U.S. Civil War may have ended differently. In our midst are the remains of at least 9 of them from several different regiments. A hobby of mine is genealogy. The DNA matches at times are eye-opening events for me. I'm a DNA match to a young lady that has a direct line to Sally Hemings and the 3rd President, Thomas Jefferson. I cannot say that I'm a match in that line, only to her. Another match has a direct line to the 10th President of the United States, John Tyler. I can't say that I'm a match to him. However, to that one person, I'm a match. But I am a 4th cousin to the late Diane Carroll. One of my grandfathers comes from James City County, Virginia. From that location on February 15, 1864, Oscar Farthing became a member of Company G, 27th Regiment U.S. Colored Troops. I've still to determine whether he is a direct line or offshoot relative. I believe offshoot relative more so. In May and June 1864, his regiment participated in several campaigns in Virginia and North Carolina, from the Rapidan River to the James River. They also guarded the wagon trains of the Army of the Potomac during the Wilderness Campaign. Sadly, he lasted all of 4 months before succumbing to disease and dying in a battlefield hospital. He is interred in the City Point National Cemetery, City Point, Virginia. That is some of the enlightened information I truly treasure finding. Information is power. The more you know, the further you can go. Reach out and learn the real truths of America. In fact, just look up the list of black inventors. That's a whole new education track for you. I grew up in a school system that did not teach African Americans history. They didn't tell us that Prince Whipple rode with General Washington across the Delaware. They didn't tell us that it was mostly U.S. colored troops at Appomattox who encircled the courthouse at General Lee's surrender. They didn't tell us about the African American women at NASA who did the math. We will learn. We will learn. Thank you. Thank you much.